All right, so let me show you what I am talking about here. Today's video, we're going to go and take a look at the skill tree, Paragon Board, and the itemization we needed for this kind of build. I am also going to show you exactly how this build works in the actual action and how we can tweak it to be able to get really high DPS single target, because for those who know, Sorceress really lacks in that department. She is not really good at anything damage if the actual enemies are not crowd controlled, and it is a big challenge to be able to do Lilith 100 in solo. So just to begin, let's go and take a look at the skill tree. The skill tree is going to be really straightforward. I'm just going to show you what I have so you can implement it also. Also, if you see in the link in the description, there is a full link for Diablo 4 build guides. Everything is in there if you want to have a visual while you do it on your own. Really simple. For the first two skills, we're just going to go and take a look at Frostbolt and its enhanced version. It's not really necessary because I don't choose anything for now. For people that play softcore, you want to use probably the Firebolt to be able to use the enchantment with it. We're going to go a little bit over this a little bit later. For the core skills, we are going to go and take Ice Shard. We are taking the enhanced Ice Shard and also the Greater Ice Shard. Greater Ice Shard is basically going to really be good when we are playing against lots of different mobs, because while we have a barrier active, every Ice Shard is going to be treating enemies as if they were frozen. And if you don't know, when they are actually frozen, they have 100% chance to ricochet off to other frozen enemies. So you want to freeze the most amount of people for your Ice Shards to be able to ricochet out of everybody. This is the enchantment we are also using because of the actual thing that it does. So Ice Shards automatically conjures and fly towards frozen enemies. So every time an enemy is frozen, not only it's going to go automatic to them, but on top of that, it's going to ricochet other enemies. So it's a win-win. It's really good. The most important enchantment that we are always going to use in hardcore is always going to be Flame Shield, because of the automatic cheat death that you get. So this is 100% mandatory. You do not take it out. It takes off one of our enchantment slots, but at the end of the day, it is survivability because we are playing hardcore over everything else. Let's go back into the skill right here. After that, I've put 1 point in Devastation and 3 points into Elemental Dominance, just to be able to get way more damage through the Ice Shards, because it is really the best damage we're gonna get from anything. Every core skill is actually gonna deal 9% increased damage, but when we cast it over 50 mana. So it's really quite fantastic. I do have a lot of defensive skills because we are using lots of immunity and unstoppable status to be able to get away from situations. The Sorceress is really squishy if she is not in a barrier or if she's not in an immune system, unstoppable. So really be careful, because on top of that, in hardcore, you die, it's done. So I have 1 point in Teleport, which I've added Enhanced to be able to get a cooldown reduction every time we hit an enemy up to 3 seconds. And also the Shimmering one, where we gain 30% damage reduction after for 3 seconds, which is really good. Flame Shield, first, to be able to use the enchantment. Second, to be able to get the 25% move speed and the healing also from it, which is really good in my opinion. And then we do 1 point in Frost Nova, 1 point in Ice Armor. Frost Nova is really important because it's going to give us the vulnerable status. If we do the enhanced and then mystical Frost Nova, every time we hit an enemy with Frost Nova, they are going to be vulnerable. Those who don't know, vulnerable is the best damage state you can get in the game. It is by far the best stat in the game, and it puts really great AoE damage out of everything else. Ice Armor is also really good. I've added once to be able to get barrier up, and every time you use a defensive skill, you are actually going to create a barrier. If you remember what we just did with Ice Shard, we took this here, where every time we have a barrier, it's going to treat enemies as if they were frozen. Fantastic. Another tip that you want to do is whenever you're not doing AoE damage and you want to do really high single target damage, you can use the destructive Ice Shards instead. So every time you use every enemy hit with 5 Ice Shards in a single cast makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. And for those who know, there is a specific aspect that we use in this build that gives us way more Ice Shards. I'm going to go over it a little bit later in the items. You can click on it in the chapters if you want to see it. But this is really good for when we go into a boss room. I always change it right before we enter it, so I can benefit from vulnerable in 2 other states. Really fantastic. Then the two best passives, I think, in my opinion, are Elemental Attunement and Glass Cannon. This one is really, really great because every time we critically strike, we have 15% chance to reset the cooldown of one of our defensive skills. Since we use 4 different skills, so we use them all basically, we're always going to get a chance to reset one of them if we critically strike. And we're going to have a lot of chance to critically strike. I'm going to show it to you a little bit later. Then Glass Cannon, it's a staple for the class. It's very, very good. 24% increased damage overall. It's completely amazing. Yes, we do get 12% more damage. We take 12% more damage, but the offset is way, way worth it. Then we're going to go down into the Conjuration. We're not taking anything other than passives in here. First passive is your Precision Magic to be able to get way more lucky hit chance. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later because it's very, very important that we do hit those lucky hits. And then we do 1 point in Align the Elements. We can do a little bit more, but I feel like anyway, you will get your 40% damage reduction if you're not getting hit. And since we have a lot of barriers and immunes, we don't really get hit often, which is fantastic. I've personally put 3 points each here, so in Mana Shield and in Protection, where we actually need to get the most amount of damage reduction. Mana Shield is every time we spend 100 mana, you gain 15% damage reduction for 5 seconds, which is great. And using a cooldown grants 30% of your maximum life as barrier. Since all of our defensive skills are on a cooldown, this is absolutely great because we are proccing protection a lot of the time. Once again, since we have a barrier up, it also triggers back the ice shards, where whenever we have a barrier active, ice shards treat enemy as frozen, and when they are frozen, they always ricochet off to other enemies. Plus, since they are also frozen, they automatically conjure and flies towards them, which is fantastic. Then let's go down here. Once we've taken the Conjuration, we're going to go back into the Masters. Masters, I have nothing other than 1 point each here. I feel that these are good, but they are not the best, so I was saving points for the passives in the next tree. Let me show you. So for this one here, Ice Veil, your barrier have 5% increased duration, which is good, but we have a lot of barrier, so it's not really, really necessary. Frost skill have 3% chance to instantly freeze. This is also really, really good, but we have an item that actually like spreads the freeze, so we don't really need to put 3 points in there. On top of that, while you have a barrier active, you apply 8% more chill. I don't even think this one is actually even worth it because personally, I do not apply chill, and I try to take off the chill effect or damage to chill enemies because the only thing that actually creates chill is deep freeze. So it's not really, really worth it. You can even take it out and put something else like in Align the Elements or something in the matter of, let's say, Ice Armor, where you want to have a little bit more mana regen when you are in your Ice Armor, which is great. So 1 point each. We can come back to this a little bit later. Then we're gonna have Permafrost. Frost skill damage 15% increased to elites. Really, really great. 3 points in this. Icy Touch. You deal 12% increased cold damage to vulnerable enemies. Fantastic. We do vulnerable and Ice Shard is cold damage. That's perfect. And then we have Frigid Breeze. Lucky hit. Cold damage against vulnerable enemies has a 20% chance to generate 15 mana. Since we are stacking a lot of lucky hits, we are going to try to proc Frigid Breeze a lot of the time, and we're going to sustain way more mana because this build is actually mana hungry, and you're going to see it a little bit later. My favorite one here is Hoarfrost, where we deal 36% increased damage to frozen enemies. This one is massive. I have 6 points in it because in my amulet I have +3 to that passive. I really wanted this one or Glass Cannon. So this one, I unfortunately didn't get it +3 Glass Cannon, but this one really does the job. And then we're going to take the Deep Freeze with its 2 enhancements. When Deep Freeze ends, we gain 10% of base life as barrier. Once again, we are stacking lots and lots of barriers, so it's really important to keep them up. And then when Deep Freeze ends, your non-ultimate cooldowns are reduced. Since we are using everything other than non-ultimate, so we have 5 of them in there, we're going to get also damage reduction, cooldown reduction in there, which is fantastic. The key passive we're going to use is Avalanche. We're also using the item that goes with it. We're going to see it a little bit later in the item chapters down below. So Avalanche, lucky hit, your frost skill have up to 10% chance to make your next cast of ice shards, frozen, or blizzard consume no mana and deal 40% increased damage. Chance is doubled against vulnerable enemies. So since we have lots of vulnerable status that we're trying to actually put, we actually got a little bit more lucky hit. We are going to try to proc Avalanche a lot of the time. Also, this is going to be a good segue for items. We are going to use the Avalanche Key passive. Now applies one additional time. Instead of once, it's going to be 2 times. You can get this really, really easily from your aspects. So just try to find it in your aspects. You should have it really, really easily. It's not something that can drop from the codex, so you cannot use it in the Codex of Power, but it's fairly common as I've been playing. So let's go and take a look at the items now. What I'm using and what I'm looking for into the helm is barrier generation, cooldown reduction, and lucky hit chance. So these 3 are really, really important because of what we talked about a little bit earlier. We want to have lots of barrier up, we want to have lots of cooldown reduction so we can use our defensive skills back to back because they're all on cooldown, and we want to have a lot of lucky hit chance to be able to proc Avalanche and to proc also the cooldowns from our passive that has a chance to be able to reset one of the cooldowns when our defensive skill cooldowns whenever you use it. Really, really important. For the equipped armor, I am using right now Raiment. Bear in mind this build is actually like for AoE damage, for fast clears on Nightmare Dungeons, level 4, tier 40 to tier 50, so you can get really good damage. This one, we can swap it out a little bit later for single target damage, or if you are really afraid of getting into the fray and getting hit, we can take this off pretty easily because we can change it with another aspect. I'm going to show it to you a little bit later. So this one is pretty straightforward. If you have a good roll, that's amazing. If not, it's not the end of the world, but it gives us damage to close enemies, damage to stunt, and 1 to glass cannon, which is why we got 4 out of 3. Lots of intelligence. I got max roll intelligence here. That was really great. And basically, whenever you use your teleport, you're going to stun people inside of it. So you're going to come in, use your teleport, it's going to stunt everybody that has been hit by the teleport. On top of that, you get 3 seconds of cooldown reduction on your teleport because you've hit lots of enemies, which is great. Great synergy there. And then basically you're going to get a 2.6 second stunt on them. The stunt enemies damage added is really good, and the close enemies too, because we're both going to be close and stunning them at the same time. This is fantastic. Then we're going to use in our gloves, we're going to take a look at ranks of ice shards. We're going to try to get critical strike chance and lucky hit chance. Once again, these 3 are really, really important. We want to have the maximum amount of damage on ice shards. Critical strike chance is one of the best stats in the game, right after vulnerable in my opinion, and lucky hit chance for us to be able to proc all the other lucky hit chance proccers that we can get. Then we're going to use the Ice Heart Brace. Once again, these 2 uniques, the Ice Heart and the Raiment, we can swap them. Whenever we're going to do something like damage boss, we're going to go in, we can take both out and then just replace them with 2 other items. I'm going to show it to you a little bit later. This one goes really, really straightforward. Enemy that dies while frozen have 18% chance to unleash Frost Nova. Great, because every time we use a Frost Nova, not only they're going to be vulnerable, but on top of that, they're going to be frozen. And once they're frozen, our ice shards are going to go a little bit everywhere. It's quite fantastic. 33% damage to injured enemies, damage to frozen, intelligence, and freeze duration. For unique items, they are never going to roll anything else than what they have stated. The only roll that can butt is in the brackets, so the percentage and the actual stats. Bear in mind that you will always get the same stats, but you will only have a flicker of difference between the brackets you can get. Then on our boots, what I really like to have is teleport, damage reduction, and movement speed. But the most important thing that I like is having the max evade charges on top of that. If you do have, the 75% increased movement speed for 1 second, it might be good, but for a playstyle that we need to get in and go out quickly, we need to have a lot of evade options, and having 3 more evades for total is fantastic. The other one I have is Flame Shield. Flame Shield also is great. +4 to rank on Flame Shield is great because it's going to give us lower cooldown and also bigger damage, plus the immunity window is going to be a little bit higher. Fantastic, this one. Then on our wand, we are going to need close damage, core damage, vulnerable damage, and the last one can be injured or anything else. It doesn't matter. I like having stack damages so we can do the most amount of damage as possible in the lowest amount of time. Plus, we imprinted the Ice Shard Pierce 4 times, dealing 23% less damage for subsequent enemy hit. It's not important because by piercing 4 more times, basically we're going to have the proc of what we were looking at earlier. If ever we have the destructive Ice Shard, hitting 5 Ice Shards in a single cast makes them vulnerable. So we're gonna proc vulnerability a lot of the time. If it's not vulnerable, the fact that we are becoming a machine gun is also really, really good. It's a absolutely fantastic and mandatory aspect for this build. On my offhand, what I'm looking for: cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance, barrier generation. Resource generation is good, but you can swap it for anything else. The imprinted one that we took is you deal 35% more damage to immobilized, stunned, or frozen enemies. We can change this also whenever we go into a boss fight. If you have another one, we're gonna move around, or you can take a two-handed staff and get the same aspect as this one here. So get 9 piercing shards instead of 4, and going in instead. So this is just another variant if ever you go single target damage when you go into boss rooms. But other than that, this one is really great because we're stacking way more frozen enemy damage, and we get cooldown reduction 2 times on this one. We get from the intrinsic stats, so the 3 first lines, you get 10.3% cooldown reduction, plus you get on the rolls, on the 4 rolls that can drop 12.9. Like I did here, it's 6.5 to 14.6. Fantastic. 12.9, 13% is very, very high, really good. We get around 23% cooldown reduction just because of this offhand. Fantastic. Then for our jewelry, we are going to go and use the imprinted, where we deal 36%. We deal more damage, increased damage while we have a barrier active. Really great. You can swap it a little bit for something else. I'm going to show you a little bit later what to. What's really important to get another cooldown reduction or frost passive. For me, I like it very much. Damage reduction is great, and percentage damage, it's fantastic. This one, we're going to go for the cooldowns. So every time we use a cooldown, every time we use a cooldown skill, so every time we use a defensive skill, basically, since we have 4, we restore 25 mana. Like I said earlier, the mana is really, really hungry in this build, so it's really important to have resource generation and ways to get back our mana. Really important. For the second one, we are going to use the critical strike has with core skill, increases your attack speed by 22%. This one is why we do really high rapid hit damages with Ice Shard, because it's the 22% increase attack speed is fantastic. What I'm looking for in this one was barrier generation, critical strike chance, damage to control enemies is good, and vulnerable damage. If you are able to stack vulnerable damage the most amount of time, do it, because it's the best stat you can get in the game. That was it for the base items on this build. Let me show you a little bit what I'm talking about when I say that you can move things around, and depending on the situation, what you want to move. So let's say you are done with a nightmare dungeon and you are going into a boss room. What you can do is move around your raiment and your ice heart and change something like this one here. So you could get damage reduction to the fullest, so 4 times damage reduction stats on one piece of item, and then you can add the barrier. So every time you hit an elite, every time you hit an elite, you basically get a barrier up, which is fantastic because barrier is such a good synergetic stat for our build. Then we're gonna get and use the other one where we gain percentage of increased armor for 4 seconds whenever we deal any type of damage, and then we're gonna get barrier generation, taller armor stats. You can get percentage damage or percentage damage reduction. Either way is good. That's what I like to do when I swap around, so I have them both right here. Also, whenever you move around, make sure that you are not double stacking your aspects. So if you move these ones here, let's say if I actually move around and I put these 2 here, one of my actual aspect might be out of use because I'm not using them anymore. This case, no, so we're good. But always check whenever you change your equipments in game, because you never know when your aspects might be doubled. If they are doubled, only one of them is taking, and then you lose a lot of damage and damage reduction possibilities. That was it for the items that you want and you need. Let's go and take a look at the Paragon Board. The Paragon Board, how I've done it, is really trying to be min-maxing the actual stats in there. So let me show you how I did it. I went on and took notes on everything that could be in any of the boards. This board is not perfect, and I am still working on it. I'm actually trying to get to 9 million to be able to redo it all. So taking all the nodes out to be able to put another board for vulnerability damage, so I can respec and do single target damage instead. So this one here, what we're going to do, we're going to take the first one here. You can take a look at the Paragon board down in the description. It's going to be way easier for you to just follow, but I want to give you big overviews of the Paragon board. First one is really simple, but I'm using the enchanter glyph in there because, as you can see here, you can get 70 intelligence, and 70 intelligence in the radius. The radius needs to be the glyph needs to be level 15 for the radius to be at max, and if it's at max, you can get 70 out of 40 intelligence, and for every 5 intelligence within the range, you get 5% increased non-physical damage, so magical damage. 70% for this one is absolutely fantastic. It's great. The second board is the board for Icefall. This one, I am going to change it for DPS a little bit later because this one is great for mob density, creating another barrier whenever we kill a frozen enemy, and all the enemies are always going to be frozen. So this is great. We are going to branch out and get it here. Plus, we're going to get the damage reductions from chilled enemies. This one, we're going to take it also out to be able to put something better on the NAS board. But just to make you understand here, we are taking damage, non-physical damage here, another, for the magical damage output, which is really great. We are going to go and activate the Icefall node, but here we are adding a glyph that uses willpower, because from what I've actually calculated, the willpower one on the Icefall board is the best in class. 54 out of 25. We get 106% damage while we are healthy. It is absolutely crazy. It can double your damage sheet from 5,000 to 10,000. It's really, really good. Mandatory in my opinion. This one here is a little bit more changeable. So in this board here, we are taking, on the third one, it's the Burning Instinct. I'm not even going to take it because it's not important in hardcore. We are not really burning enemies, and it doesn't it's not worth it to go all the way down there and waste up our Paragon points to be able to use that. In here, we are using the Control Glyph Socket, 110% damage to crowd control enemies, so chilled, frozen, whatever it is, stunned with our remnant, we are dealing way more damage. And then you deal 10% increased damage to slowed or chilled enemies, or instead 20% increased damage to stunned or frozen enemies. And since we have remnant and we are doing freeze all the time, so the two uniques that we have, we are always going to stun them with our teleport, and we're always going to freeze them with our with our Frost Nova and everything else. So this one is actually good for AoE. I am going to swap it when I need to do single target boss DPS, because the only thing that's really good is when a boss is like staggered. So when the line under his health bar is full, it becomes blue, he gets staggered, and then you can dish out a lot of damage. But for you to be able to get that stagger, you need to use Frost Nova, you need to use your stunts, you need to use your deep freeze. It can take a little bit of time, so that's why I'm going to change it when I do single target DPS. But for anything else, this one is absolutely fantastic. And then I branched out to be able to get 16% damage to elites. Also this one here, 8% damage to elites. This one is not necessary, but I really wanted this one, so I took it. And another 8% damage to elites right here. And then before going to the next Paragon board, I've taken 3% damage reduction from elites, another one here, and a 13% damage reduction again from elites. What I'm going to do, I'm also going to take these off to be able to get a sixth board a little bit later. So this is going to be in the next video, where I'm going to redo my whole character with all the Paragon boards to be able to go and dish out the most amount of damage in single target DPS to be able to kill Lilith, the Echoes of Lilith, the level 100 pinnacle boss in Diablo 4. For the next board, we are going to use the Exploit. Exploit is really great because we are not only using dexterity on this board here, which is the Enchantment Master. We are not going to go for the legendary node. We are actually going to proc the actual glyph. And since the glyph here has the most amount is dexterity, I've put this one here instead of anything else, because I feel that vulnerable is absolutely busted in this game. The sorceress doesn't have the most amount of vulnerable stats we can, because we're not like the rogues or the barbarians where we have 4 different slots of weapon or 3 different slots of weapon. So we need to stack vulnerability in other ways. This one is fantastic to do so. 5 dexterity percentage within the range deals 3.2% increased damage. This one is level 15, 25% increased vulnerable damage. It's great. And on top of that, dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy increases your damage by 1% for 6 seconds, up to 10%. You can't go wrong with that. On the last board, I went here and took another dexterity one. This one is to close enemies. It's territorial, 58.7% when you are at level 15. So the radius is maxed out, and you get on top of that another 10% damage reduction against closed enemies. The next board I'm going to use is going to be the Frigid Fate. I am going to be doing a 6 board Paragon. So this one, and I'm trying to go for all the glyphs in this one. I am going to, like I said, take out all of these here to be able to create another. I think we can rotate it here like that and try to get the actual glyph the fastest possible. But the most important is going to be the vulnerable damage that we are also going to stack again. So this one here, we have 5%, 10%, another 10 here, that's 20. If we get the willpower, it's going to be another 20, another 10%. So we're going to be 30% on, and another 5 here, plus you get other vulnerables right here. It's quite fantastic. I'm actually going to be doing a full overhaul of my Paragon board, because this board I want it to be in a 3rd or 4th position to be able to activate all of the magic nodes. I'm going to do another video when this is done. Hopefully you guys are going to like it. In the meantime, I do hope you guys liked this one here. It was a big video. Thank you for watching, and hopefully you will be able to destroy everything in the game because of this, because it's a quite fantastic build. Subscribe to follow my journey on trying to beat Lilith, the actual final boss of the game, level 100. I will try to be the first source to defeat Lilith solo in hardcore. It's going to be a really hard challenge, but I guess we are in it together. We can do this. Please leave a like, a comment, and a subscription. It is a free and fantastic way to help this channel. Peace.